All right, welcome back to another episode of the Empowered by Victors podcast. I'm your host, Stacy Orsborn, and today I have much requested and highly sought after again, Nicole Legler, owner of Always in New. Bleh, I can't talk today. Forgive me. Always in Motion Nutrition. She is also a coach here at the Victors Lincoln location. Has recently stepped down from the head coaching position to be able to grow her Victors Nutrition and Always in Motion private practices. And we're super excited to have her on today. Every time I get asked a nutrition code question, I'm always like prefacing like, I think Nicole would say, or I'm pretty sure I've heard Nicole say. Um, and it's just fun to be able to like sit down and have actual conversations with you and pick your brain in regards to your knowledge because it is wide and vast. And people loved our last episode on low energy availability. So I think that just being able to continue to educate women and men, I suppose, on nutrition is exciting. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I know it's so fun, especially in the Victor's realm of all the not just nutrition, but all the overlapping professions and streams of thoughts and philosophies and educations. And we are lucky over there at Victor's LNK, especially with all of the health professionals that we have in our space to have all the learners and different professions to overlap in one space. It is sure fun, especially since it's all relevant. We're all one big
Yeah.
body with lots of streams of health needs and information. So happy to be here and excited to get started.
Yeah, me too. It's funny, all of us are, so many of us are learners over here, and then there's people like me that are like learners, and then like, but also by paralysis, like you learn so much that you're like, okay, now I don't know what to do with any of this information. Now I don't know where to take it. Now I don't know. Okay, but I should learn more on how to do that. Whereas you are so good at like, okay, I've learned this. Now these are the steps and processes to go ahead and implement and move things forwards, which makes you unique and makes you awesome. And it's a lot of fun to work with you in that way because I'm like, oh, look how she did that. Like, that's where that goes. um,
The implication.
so today we kind of throw around a bunch of different ideas, and there are so many different topics in the realm of nutrition that we get asked daily in the gym, that we hear on whatever different media platform, that you hear from your doctor, that you hear from my friend that just did intermittent fasting and lost 20 pounds, like all of the different things that we hear in regards to nutrition. And we thought it would be fun to kind of almost do like a true and false kind of guide our conversation today. And if we get to all of them, great. If we don't, great. I'm nowhere to find you, so I'm sure I can get you back on here. Um, so I formulated these questions kind of in stage of life, right? Like, because that's something that we talk about here at Victorious in regards to women. Um, you know, the exercise component needs to shift and change based on stage of life, but I'm sure you can speak to in regards to nutrition, it probably also shifts to a certain extent through stage of life, right?
Right, absolutely.
So if we can, hone in on some of these things that maybe people hear about or don't hear about, then we can start to get an idea of where we want to take the conversation. So let's start with teenage girls. We have a decent amount of teenage girls within the space and other spaces throughout, but I think this is one area of life that I'm excited to like continue to serve and grow. I know you're super passionate about this stage of life for young athletes as well from your own experiences. So one of the first things that came up was, do girls need more iron than boys due to menstruation? So because we bleed, do girls need more iron than men due to menstruation?
Right. And I think it's important when we talk about the teenage girl that when you look at research and needs, all of that starts to change once puberty hits and once menstruation actually happens. So female versus male profiles really start to develop post puberty. So when you look at teenagers, and when I speak and when we are speaking about teenagers, we're talking about teenagers that already have a menstrual cycle or have already gone through puberty because obviously that happens at a lot of different ages, but hormone wise and need wise, girls and boys until puberty are pretty similar in their needs. But once that menstruation hits, needs absolutely change for a plethora of reasons. So, in the topic of iron, post puberty, teenage girls need more than double than their male counterpart needs. Males need about, the RDA is about 8 milligrams. That is based on a lot of things, but that is the RDA here in the US. Whereas females post puberty, once teenagers hit menstruation, they're going to need more like 18 plus milligrams. Then you get into females that are also athletes, so teenage onward, and optimal iron needs might be well beyond that 18 milligrams. So, in answering your question, they absolutely have different needs, especially with iron because of blood loss in menstruation and during the period cycle. And that happens at the start of puberty. But then when you look at female athletes, even from a young age, the demand of oxygen to the muscles, blood flow, and then blood loss that's happening can be even beyond that 18 milligrams. Getting to, I know we're talking about teenagers, but getting to individuals in pregnancy, when that blood volume increases even more, the needs increase even more so than that, up to about 27 milligrams per day. So boys and men need about 8. Anybody after puberty, those females need about 18 plus, and pregnancy even more than that, closer to 30.
Wow, that's crazy when you like put it in numbers like that. That is significantly more.
Right. And when you look at when that's happening, again, I know we have lots of topics to cover. I feel like I'll eat every
No,
question. I'll be
you're
like,
fine.
this could be a whole podcast. But when you look
Mhm.
at iron needs and iron losses, it's really interesting. I was actually just talking about it to a client recently of a lot of iron loss happens, of course, during the period, during menstruation, in that, 4 to 7, 8 days. But iron absorption, that's so cool how the body works, is at its peak right before the period. So if that's something that you struggle with, or you have heavier periods and you're more susceptible to low iron, especially as a teenager who they might be fatigued or low energy, and having a bigger period initially to start once they're starting that first few cycles, a lot of losses
Mhm.
potentially happening of iron during that period itself. But then prior to the period, in that luteal phase before your period, the body, based on its hormones, is actually at peak absorption of iron. So it's really cool how those ebbs and flows really counteract each other and can help the body absorb more, knowing it's about to lose more. But nutritionally, that's definitely when I'm using the tactic with my clients and individuals, recommending that's a time we want to push more iron absorption and push
Mhm.
more iron foods as leading up to the period. A lot of times I feel like logically we think of it as, well, I'm losing more, so I should be eating more,
In and
when
out.
actually we should be eating more leading up to it because our body's at peak absorption. So that way we're almost like extra supplying our body, and our body's storing more, knowing that the period's about to come and we're going to lose more.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that that it's common what we see within girls in those early menstruation phases that a lot of women or young girls just aren't aware of, but also I think practitioners utilize other means. Some practitioners utilize other means of maybe minimizing symptoms, would just be that, like you mentioned, like that not only irregularity in some periods when they're first starting, but also the intensity and like the levels of bleeding is a lot higher. It's a lot more intense. Like they have a lot more symptoms. It's very like sporadic. So when, mom is bringing daughter in or whoever's bringing daughter into practitioner and saying, they're having these irregular periods, like very common in the first, year, maybe even 2 years when after you start your period. So, being able to support some of those feelings and the symptoms and such with, timing iron absorption along with many other nutrients, I'm sure,
Right.
hopefully could help mitigate some of those things.
Right. And I think that, especially in the conversations of doctors, hopefully the conversation is evolving as we know more, right? When
Right.
I was first getting my period, and probably same with you, no doctor ever spoke to me about how to manage my symptoms or anything with nutrition, of course, or
No.
hydration or iron needs or anything like that. I mean, it was, oh, you get uncomfortable periods, here's an oral
So birth
contraceptive,
control.
here's birth control, right? Like, and I do
Yep.
think that unfortunately still is the case a lot of times. And that's leading now, decades later, to a lot of individuals in their mid 20s and 30s having undiagnosed PCOS and endometriosis, because at that puberty age, when it's like these are heavy or uncomfortable periods, to mitigate the symptoms, we're just treating. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with treating symptoms and putting an individual on an oral or birth control for a slew of reasons. But
Mhm.
when you look at nutrition and strength training and how we can treat our body, lymphatic system, all of these other systems, of there's a lot of things that you can do to manage symptoms proactively. and be able to support that. And hopefully that is going to be the conversation that evolves over time now that we know these are things that can make a really big difference at a young age and empower girls to feel really good and not just want to avoid those symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. You said the lymphatic system. That like just light bulb just went off in my head. I'm like, oh, that's a good point. Wow. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
Um,
Get Bethany in
um,
here.
yeah, get Bethany in here and make my brain bleed a little bit. Um, no, so as in regards to, girls as they're transitioning into these phases, I think that there's a lot of misconceptions in regards to well, number one, I would say universally, maybe I'm going to generalize here, but like girls are starting their periods earlier than maybe what we were used to historically, right? Like they're starting at a younger age. They're going through puberty symptoms, maybe even before they obviously start their period. They're starting to grow buds, breasts, like all of those things, pubic hair, maybe a lot earlier in life than maybe you or myself, or even, our grandmas and our moms, for sure probably did. So, I've heard the theory that it's due to the amount of hormones in our foods or the amount of hormones in our milk or something along those lines, which is why girls are going into puberty sooner. True, false, somewhere in between. We
Yeah.
don't know.
Right. We don't know in the sense of what's really hard. And if you talk to anybody in as a dietitian or anybody who reads research, that the annoying answer is always it depends. Because we can't, unfortunately, with research, we cannot cause someone, a human being, to have or not have a menstrual cycle. We cannot, from birth, say this person we are changing their life to cause them to have a period, and this person we're not. That would be unethical, of course. So we have to look at research correlations. So, from a correlating standpoint, we have seen in the last few decades that there are more growth hormones in things like dairy and in our animal products and meats. We have seen an extremely increased rise in ultra processed foods and preservatives and in that sector. And it's a really hot topic, and it's something I will never say the right thing, right? Because there's always people on both sides that have strong opinions. And I don't think it's not a coincidence that we've had a very big change in the way that we produce and eat our foods and how it's impacted lots of things. Early onset puberty, things like ADHD and ADD. There's a lot of these chronic disorders, diseases, cognitive functioning, puberty, hormone changes that we're starting to see shift and evolve in the same line that we're seeing food industry shift and evolve. Now, can we say for certain that it's XYZ causing puberty to happen earlier? No, but I definitely think that there's a strong correlation between the two. We also know that in the world and in our time and history that humans evolve faster for a lot of reasons. I mean, think about screens and all of those environmental exposures that we're also having. So it's hard to really pinpoint, is it dairy or is it not, or is it growth hormone or is it not in our food? But I think there's strong enough evidence that shows our food is evolving in the types of food we're producing, especially in the United States, and the average early onset of puberty now versus 20 years ago. So it's kind of true, but hard to be 100% certain. And it's hard to also then just be like, well, I'm not going to have any animal protein. Some people absolutely, that is their preference, and there's not enough evidence to show individuals who are plant-based not getting a period earlier than people who have consumed animal products their whole life. I think that would be really interesting if there was more studies on that. It's hard to really, first of all, researching 10 to 13-year-old girls from birth onward, pretty tough task, but
Right.
I think there's a lot of concepts there that are worth investigating. It's just hard to be certain what's causing those things. But I do think there's a pretty strong correlation between how our environment is, food, and other factors causing puberty to be earlier than it once was.
Which is interesting because then we're living longer too. Well, I mean, to a certain extent, right? Like we're
Right.
living longer than our ancestors were too. So we're essentially increasing the amount of time we're in perimenopause and menopause.
Hmm.
And from there,
Or infertile, we're a little bit longer fertile too.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it is interesting, and our lifespan is increasing, and that's why it's hard to say, are we just evolving better, or is this,
Right.
and it's not necessarily a negative thing, but the speed of hormonal development is definitely
Right.
faster than it once was. Is that
Right.
negative? Not necessarily. Is it related to food? Likely. It's also related to a lot of other things. And like you said, we're living longer. We're living better quality lives longer. People are able to get pregnant at a later
Yes.
age than they once were too. So there's benefits to a lot of the things we're putting in our foods and that we're doing as well. It's not always just negative.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Very, very, very valid points there. I think it's, I don't have girls. Like, I have three boys, so I have never had to like make nutritional choices thinking about, I mean, obviously for myself, but like,
Mhm.
choosing what type of milk I gave my boys or what type of, which I'm sure it affects boys too, honestly. But like, what type of sources, but sources matter to a certain extent, I think, regardless of what we're talking, whether it's a male, female, quantity obviously matters, but I think like choosing the better sources of our food always tends to be hopefully the safer choice for everyone, correct? I mean, obviously within the means of finances and everything else, but
Exactly. The finances is a huge component too. I say this all the time that there's an A to Z spectrum. There's always a good, better, and best. I think if you have the capability to buy like we live in the Midwest, I have not done this yet. I don't have like a household and a family yet, but I'd love to be able to do like a quarter cow. And I
right.
get my eggs from a local place here and milk from local. So if you have the means and have the resources to buy a locally or grass-fed or free range or antibiotic or growth hormone free option, it is definitely something that I recommend. Looking at certain components of grass-fed, grain finish, and all of that with meats, there's a wide spectrum of evidence for a lot of reasons, but when you look specifically at its quality source and how it impacts our body, finding those higher qualities is definitely something I recommend. But of course, it has to fit in the budget. And there's a
Right.
lot of really good options that are less cost, and it's not going to, it's hard to really pinpoint what is worth it and what's not. So it's looking at a whole of what are you eating most frequently, how is that impacting your body, and how can you spend the money and budget on that high quality product?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I used to joke like if I ever had a daughter, like I would always just like only buy like the organic and clean as possible of all the hormones things because I was like, worried about this or that. And then I'm like, actually, you know what? Like it probably matters across the board. It's probably not just a girl thing. It's probably like on a boy thing here too. And then you have teenage boys in the house that drink a gallon like within
Costco
a
it is.
day. And we get what we can get at this point.
Exactly. And I think too, the biggest thing I battle as a dietitian specifically is the social media noise. There's so much noise on social media that's you have to do raw milk or then pasteurized is bad. Like pasteurized milk keeps us alive, everybody. So that's not on our list, but let's myth bust this. If you want to drink raw milk, there's nothing wrong with that. But pasteurizing milk keeps us alive and healthy and prevents disease. It's
Yep.
okay. And figuring out that middle ground of, like we just said, we live longer for a reason. What is the middle ground of this has been modified, preserved, pasteurized, whatever it is for a reason, versus this might have a mass grown, feedlot grown, and that might be negatively impacting us. And that's what's really hard to navigate as a dietitian, especially when the food noise can be really loud, especially on social media. There's so much misinformation out there that is very convincing that this is what you have to do. So just again, checking the fact sources, looking at professionals that are truly reading the research and spending the time to know all the different sides. And usually when you do, like I would like to say myself, that looking at all the different sides, the answer is usually, well, it depends on what do you want it for? Do you want it the least processed for this? Well, okay, well then you risk that. And there's always, it's a double-edged sword, no matter what the topic is.
Absolutely. I'm this and or yes
Right.
and no and
And it's going to cost you a lot of money.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I think it's interesting the like uh we talk about dairy, we talk about inflammation related to dairy. I think that's something that goes around quite a bit, but Speaking specifically still to that younger demographic, obviously the acne portion of things is usually pretty prevalent in the puberty stage of life, right? Like, I think there's a lot of different things that factor into this, and I know that, but I think that, taking your child to a dermatologist and, all of those things, like, I think those things can help. There's some things that could potentially cause issues later on down the road, which I'm not a dermatologist, so I'm not going to go into that. But when it comes to, like, for example, one of my sons has going through puberty, definitely suffers from significant acne on his forehead, versus my other son doesn't, like, whatsoever, just doesn't seem to be having the same issue. I did not suffer from acne when I was going through puberty, but I have friends in my life that absolutely did. Like, it was a very traumatic and very horrible thing for them. And we know, well, we should know at this point, the gut skin correlation, like, being such a huge component of the way our skin is presenting, so closely related to gut, and what is happening in our gut. So I think that there's things that, we blame hormones for these acne changes, but what else is going on here? And what could we do nutritionally speaking, or don't do nutritionally speaking, to maybe help support that stage of life?
Hormones absolutely can cause acne just in and itself, no change involved in anything else. So, not discrediting that. Again, it's an and conversation of hormones can definitely have an impact on skin, especially in that early regulation and change and how the skin is responding, but also looking at nutritional changes. So, dairy is a very hot topic in acne for female versus male. All people can be lactose intolerant, which is not a milk allergy. For reference, it just means you're not having enough lactase enzyme to digest all of the lactose, which is the carbohydrate in dairy products, and you don't digest it as efficiently or effectively as you should. Women actually have a higher susceptibility to lactose intolerance compared to men. It's been very well researched. It's pretty well-known fact of women tend to be less tolerable or more susceptible to lactose intolerance compared to men. So you will see that women tend to struggle with dairy digestion a little bit more than men, specifically in that lactose, so digesting the carbohydrate of milk proteins and milk products, excuse me. Also, in that conversation, you look at the change of intake that teenagers have during puberty. We love to blame dairy, and it absolutely might be. Again, if they're not digesting lactose properly, it might be causing some inflammation in the gut because it's not digesting. There's maybe some more fermentation. Things aren't moving as modal as they should be. That additional gas and inflammation then, of course, can cause endocrine, lymphatic, a lot of other functions in our body to get a little aggravated or slowed down or trapped, cue acne in the skin. Another thing, though, that it's really important to look at is I know a lot of teenagers that once they become teenager, their intake increases significantly. Their intake of less nutritious foods, more indulgent foods, more fast foods, more XYZ foods that might have some excessive sugars in it or inflammatory items in it also occur. So looking at that as well, and I know I can speak on this as an individual, if I'm traveling more or eating out more, that my skin does not like that. And I think with teenagers, we see the shift also just culturally and environmentally of typically more increase. They want to go to the mall, which I heard malls are back, I guess. So they like to go hang out at the mall. I actually saw your son at Shields the other week. And did say hi. He did say hi to me. He was very polite. He did say hi to me. And I'm like, this is, you go hang out at Shields with your friends nowadays. So you go and you go get candy or whatever, fast food. And so there's an increase also around that same time, typically with either eating out or fast food or treats, indulgences. And so a lot of times that acne can be related to food intake because of those excessive added sugars, saturated fats, processed foods, pro-inflammatory foods. Also, hormones might cause additional stress. That can also cause acne to occur. So you look at all these lanes, and dairy for sure can be one. It's an easy one to remove and to see how it impacts the skin. Definitely for females, they're digesting dairy or lactose quite significantly less than male counterparts. But with puberty and that teenage age, Dairy can be one, but it also can just be the other foods that they're eating that might be causing inflammation, the stress. Maybe they're not sleeping as well. Maybe they're now starting their periods and they're having more loss of fluids and they're not hydrating as well. So they're not getting rid of toxins. They're not getting fluids through their system. So typically, especially with the teenagers, I will start with the total body experience before we remove everything, just in the sense of keeping relationships with food healthy, looking at not just blaming one thing and saying, oh, I can't have dairy, and then that's their brain the rest of their lives potentially. But hey, maybe we try removing dairy for a couple weeks and other things, and then one thing at a time we add in and really start to see what is causing that acne person to person.
Which, like you said, this and something else,
Mm-hmm.
which is annoying for all women all the time.
Oh, you're right.
In all
It's
stages
a
of life.
process,
But
but I do think it's worth the time, especially at teenagers, to explain how food and other things make your body feel, especially in this age group of teenage, post-puberty girls getting their periods, of how is this making your body feel? What are some other things that make it feel good versus not so good? And empowering them to make the decision versus like, oh, well, you must be dairy intolerant. We can't have any dairy. And my mom said I shouldn't have milk. Well, maybe let's trial that for a few weeks, but then you should reintroduce it and see how it impacts your skin. We need to see that start to finish to really rule out what is or is not causing acne or other symptoms related to PMS and puberty.
yeah, yeah, that's all very true. I always learn so much when I talk to you. It's fascinating. Hormonal, I think is a good place to like switch over to some like hormonal imbalances and leading into like women maturing as we're maturing here. Hormonal imbalances, both sex, related hormones as well as other hormones, can make it harder for women to lose weight, even in a calorie deficit. True or false?
Absolutely true. This is something I see all the time, especially in a place like Victorous, where a lot of the demographic is the active adult from, 28 to 40 is a big part of our demographic here at Victorous. There's a lot of undereater females, meaning they on paper are eating in a calorie deficit and they're not losing weight. Science and bioenergetics say that if you're eating less calories than you're burning, you should be losing weight. And that, unfortunately, can be stunted by hormones. And hormones are not just sex hormones. So, from a sex hormone standpoint, when estrogen declines for whatever reason, under fueling, perimenopause, but especially in that perimenopause, the start of perimenopause, even postpartum hormone imbalances that can occur very commonly. When estrogen declines, it is decreasing our ability to keep and repair muscle, and it's increasing our ability to store body fat. So a lot of times individuals who will have declining estrogen, they'll start to say like, I am still working out as hard. Feel like I'm eating really clean or whatever, and I'm doing all the right things and I'm getting softer. I'm like not recovering from the gym. I'm not lifting heavier. I'm actually decreasing the weights that I'm lifting. And I feel like I'm getting more fat on my body, especially that like stomach midsection area fat that is very common with women. This doesn't mean that you're in menopause always, but one of the hormones that are really, it's related to this is estrogen. So when estrogen's declining, it's causing a impact on metabolism in muscle versus fat and holding on to fat. Even when in a calorie deficit, you might just be losing muscle and storing fat. And to my knowledge, that's nobody's goal most of the time. So with that hormone, a lot of times that is declining. Estrogen is either a postpartum situation, a low energy situation, or perimenopause when we see estrogen specifically declining. Other relevant hormones is thyroid. Thyroid's another really common hormonal imbalance in women. When our thyroid produces less hormones, we also have a slowed down metabolism. So you might be eating the same amount, but less thyroid hormones in the body slows down your generalized baseline metabolism. and therefore now metabolism's low, we're eating the same, now we're in a caloric surplus, even though you're not eating more, and then you're gaining weight even, not only resisting weight loss, but a lot of weight gain can start happening, or resistance to weight loss. That's something I very commonly see with women that happen a lot of times postpartum, actually, like their estrogen's fine, and they're like, well, I'm doing all the right things, but I'm not losing any weight and I'm in a calorie deficit. A lot of times their TSH, or that thyroid stimulating hormone, can be low. It's important to also check your T3 and T4. A lot of doctors will just check your TSH. That might be normal, but your actual thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, might be out of whack. What was the chuckle for? Do we have to?
I was gonna say it's funny you said that because in that perimenopause workshop just the other day that we did with Mary Jane, one of our nurses, a member, but who's a nurse, she was like, just so you know, when they check your thyroid at the OB or at the doctor, they're checking one, but they need to be checking three and four. Like they need to be checking the actual like functioning side of things deeper, just as much as the other one. So it was just funny you said
You
that
don't
because I
have
was
enough
like, oh,
active.
there's that.
Yep, if you don't have enough active hormones, and glad we're all in alignment there. So make sure, and that's something easy that you can do as a listener who just going to your OB, going for an annual. When get an annual blood, I highly, highly recommend to do an annual panel, sometimes biannually if you need to, and request for those specific hormones. Request for a baseline hormone. If you have natural female hormones, get a baseline before you're in perimenopause so you have something to compare it to. Ask for that extra day. Hey, can you do my T3 and T4? And they might be like, well, if your TSH is normal, just be like, I don't care, I'll pay for it. Just get it checked and then find a new provider. Um, and like, and so that's a big one too. Another one that's right. You're not tired. You're just a new mom. Well, maybe both. Maybe you're tired and your hormones are out of whack. So let's get it checked and definitely advocate for yourself. As jokingly as is, it's super important that you're with a provider that listens to you and that's knowledgeable in the female realm. We're very lucky to have providers here in Lincoln that we refer to quite a bit, Mary Jane being absolutely one of them, over at Wellity, and quite a bit others here locally that advocate for women, will run the panels as necessary to look at all of the factors involved. Another one that comes to mind, and there's quite a few, but three main ones with estrogen and thyroid, is definitely cortisol. That's a hot topic right now on social media. Um, it's it's sometimes overblamed, in my opinion. It's not always a cortisol issue. Cortisol is very acutely changing, meaning every day you can have a different level, but cortisol absolutely can cause some weight loss resistance, some fat storage that's happening when your body's in that overly stressed out state, that sympathetic fight or flight mode. Our body likes to hold on to fat. It's just a survival mechanism. Your body's trying to take care of you. I know that aesthetically that doesn't maybe please people, but when your body's in that stress state for whatever reason, environmental, emotional, or hormonal imbalance, it's causing that fat retention as well. So all that to say, you can have hormone imbalances, and that's going to be a huge cause to some fat loss or weight loss challenges, or hindrances. One of the clients that I'm working with right now, and this happens quite frequently, we got her hormones checked and working on a little bit of progesterone, and then nutritionally came in way under eating, and she's right now eating, I think, like 600 plus more calories than when she initially came in per day. Started on some progesterone support for that, and I think testosterone too, off the top of my head, and she's lost 9 pounds in less than 2 months. So
Yeah.
it's really cool when you can eat more and get your hormones figured out, and you eat the right things, and you're anti-inflammatory, and you lose weight as a result. So
Imagine that.
yeah, we love to defy basic science of calories in versus out here.
Well, it's just not that simple, unfortunately. I mean, it is as simple as that, and yet it's not that simple.
Yeah, and I tell
Um,
people you have to be in a deficit to lose weight. You
right,
do. That's basic science, but other functions need to be happening in your body correctly to lose fat and sustain, and if not, gain muscle.
right. I think that's interesting. We have on here like women are not able to indulge as often as men or eat at night because it causes more fat gain. I think I use this example a lot. Like I feel like men, if they decide they want to lose weight and they take out coffee creamer for whatever reason, like they just tend to lose weight like real quick. Like all they had to do was just take out that coffee creamer or something as simple as just changing a little bit of their diet, and it seems like they have the ability to lose weight easier. But then the side of it, like the gaining weight side of it, you know, women, thinking that we can't indulge, like if we indulge and they indulge, we're more prone to putting on body fat than they are.
Right. So we, as typically women, have smaller bodies. So we're more susceptible to the same amount of indulgences causing weight gain in the sense of we burn less than a male counterpart who's taller and weighs more than us. So for
Hmm.
that, I guess, yes, true that women are more susceptible to weight gain because we have less of a bucket of calories, typically speaking, because we're in smaller frames most of the time. But the biggest thing with being able to indulge, and this is something that saddens me deeply in the female space in general, is we think that we have to just eat perfectly or eat a lot of small calories in order to lose weight or sustain a low weight. And that is true, absolutely, but it's true because something's not functioning correctly. Metabolism, hormones, just the use of under eating, which we talked a lot about in our other podcasts. But a lot of times it feels true and it is the reality because of all of these other challenges. But if you are having, healthy hormones, healthy physiological function, healthy stress levels, and everything else in your functionality checks out, then you absolutely can and should, in my opinion, have indulgences, have a really flexible eating schedule, be able to be fluid and not so restrictive. The challenge with women is a lot of times, traditionally speaking, if women have kids, there is a higher stress demand, mental load, and cognitive load, activity load, whatever it may be, that can be impacting some of those factors, can be impacting a woman's ability to reach those optimal states. So then their reality is, I can't eat as much or else I'll gain weight. And that is absolutely true. I don't want to discredit that. And I also don't want to make it sound like it's easy to just be in really healthy hormonal states. So with all that said, if you can get your body, and that takes a lot of effort sometimes, and a lot of providers, and a lot of time, but if you can get your body in a state where it's functioning optimally, then we should and absolutely can be able to indulge or be able to eat out or whatever it may be and have just as much impact as a male counterpart has. The challenge with that is we do have a little less buffer, needing less calories, and we also a lot of times we're more susceptible as women to have functionality challenges, thyroid, digestion, cortisol, CRP, female sex hormones. So I would say the answer is there's more risk and less room for error as women compared to men because of these potential challenges, both in life and physiologically, can have, and how that impacts the potential to gain weight.
Yeah, makes complete sense. On that spectrum, I think that this would be a good time to ask specifically. I mean, I think it's universally said, like, you know, muscle weighs more than fat, muscle burns more than fat. And I think that speaking to the metabolizing ability of a muscle versus fat here, and the benefits of putting on some sort of muscle mass. Does that mean like women should walk around, with the bulky, like hulking out? Like if you want to, that's fantastic. Props to you because that took a lot of freaking work. Um, stature, but what the benefits of carrying muscle mass on your body can do to maybe even increase your ability to indulge a little bit. I know that sounds a little bit counterproductive, but I mean there is some magic in that. True, false.
I think that's absolutely accurate. And it's okay I tell people this realistically a lot of it's okay to also set yourself up for life success. And life
Right.
success isn't always restrictive, but to answer your question, muscle versus fat. So a pound is a pound. They weigh the same. 1 pound of feather weighs the same as 1 pound of brick. That's the old, like, myth of feathers don't weigh any less than bricks. A pound is a pound. However, there's a density difference. So muscle is denser in volume than fat is. I don't have the old 90s display of a pound of muscle and a pound of fat, but if
With the
you're
pen next
above the
to
age
it,
of 20, you know what I'm talking about. You've
with
seen
the
the
black
diagram in a
pen.
health class. Yeah.
Black pen is like
So
on top of it.
gross. Yeah. Everyone knows the diagram I'm talking about. And if not, you're really young and thank you for listening. You're setting yourself up for a lot of success if you don't know what I'm talking about. So, with the metabolic impacts that it has, muscle increases your baseline energy expenditure. Meaning, the more muscle you have, the more calories or fat you burn at rest. And when I say fat, yes, the excess fat, but just fat for fuel, the subcutaneous fat, the fat all over your body, and also the fat that you're consuming through foods, your healthy fats that you're also consuming. So, when you have more muscle, you are burning more calories at rest if you laid in bed all day versus if you don't have any or less muscle than someone who does. So to your point, Stacy, and this is something that we're never going to support a toxic mindset around food and exercise. However, the truth and reality is the more muscle you have, the more buffer you have to eat more because you burn more. I said the other day I was coaching a class and I said something about like I don't track my calories currently, but I probably eat between like 2,000 and 2,400 calories a day, give or take, the day. And people were appalled. I'm like, well, I have good muscle on and I don't gain any weight. Like that's to my knowledge, I don't weigh myself daily, but like I stay about the same body composition and I feel very comfortable and healthy in my body composition and that's because if you have muscle and you're an active person, you have a lot of calories to give. And when you eat and your body enjoys eating and you have a healthy metabolism, muscle plays a really big role in that. It plays a role in how many calories you burn at rest. That keeps your body composition lean and strong and aesthetically, typically in the range that people want it to be. But it also allows you to have a little bit more freedom and fluctuation with food versus someone with a lot less muscle and decreased metabolism who undereats, who, yeah, if you have the same overindulgence as I do, there is going to be different impacts based on body composition. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the big topic or thing I hear right now is like muscle helps decrease insulin resistance. Insulin
Mm.
resistance being thrown around quite a bit. Like, in maybe speak to number one, what is insulin resistance, first and foremost? And then, true or false, muscle helps decrease that.
Yeah, absolutely. True for sure in how it impacts. So muscle, keeping this as short and streamlined as possible, insulin resistance is the body's decreased ability to process carbohydrates correctly. So when you eat any carbohydrate, whether it's a fruit, a potato, a whole grain, or chips, it all breaks down into the same simple carbohydrates, glucose being the one that gets into your bloodstream. So it breaks down to the simple carb and it gets into your bloodstream. Insulin's job is to then be released. It's a hormone for reference. Insulin's a hormone. It's going to be released to take those carbohydrates and put it to places it belongs. Carbohydrates can get put into the liver as well as the muscles. It typically for women versus men gets put a little bit more muscularly than in the liver. So we have a little bit less immediate energy sources, which is a really cool topic we can talk about. But it basically takes carbohydrates into your body and puts them in places that they can be stored. So when you're exercising, when you're going to weight train or Pilates or go for a run, let's say, because you use more carbs in a run than a walk, then it's able to take out, not insulin, it's the counterpart, it's called glucagon. It takes out those carbohydrates and gives you those energy. So we want to keep our blood sugar levels, our immediate blood sugar availability pretty level. So over time and age, or if you have too much carbohydrates, chronically speaking, or you have hormone imbalances or less muscle, your insulin, this hormone, doesn't work as well as it should, which means it has trouble getting released in the amount, frequency, and quality in how it is taking those carbohydrates and putting them where it belongs. The risk for this then is pre-diabetes and then type 2 diabetes. This insulin resistance happens a lot for women who have some other hormonal imbalance issues, individuals who are inactive, have genetic obesity, high cholesterol a lot of times, and insulin resistance can kind of play in the same field as well. There's a lot of correlations between those two levels. And so with muscle specifically, to answer your question, higher muscle volume has been linked to also show better insulin sensitivity, which basically means the insulin is sensitive to carbohydrates and how it acts and responds most efficiently and effectively.
So it's essentially like trying to fuel them because they're there,
Yeah.
right?
hmm Yeah, that's a great way of putting
And
it.
like,
Especially because carbs are going into the muscles. The more muscle you have, the more ability you can store carbohydrates. And when you get into off topic, but it's really cool for our endurance athletes listening in, when you get into carb loading, the muscle volume plays a very big impact on how much carbs you actually can absorb because the glycogen stores, which is the stored form of carbohydrate, goes to those muscles. And then if we don't have enough muscle or storage forms and we eat too many carbs, well, where does it go then? If you've saturated your stores, then it gets actually transferred into fat stores.
right. Wow. I mean, it
And
makes
that's a
sense.
lot
I
harder to
mean,
break down.
yeah, yeah. And from an endurance standpoint, you want to eat carbs, eat carbs, eat carbs, eat carbs, but also we need muscle to also support that metabolism of those
hmm
things well
You see
or
a lot of
efficiently to
runners.
perform.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of runners who are in a healthy weight but actually tend to have insulin resistance. And a lot of times they also have low skeletal muscle mass. And there's a big correlation there as well, even though they're exercising plenty, but they're not processing carbohydrates correctly. So there's a lot of other reasons, but that could be one of them.
I think carbs is something that is still a thing. Like carbs are something that women should avoid. They will make you gain weight, especially I think in our perimenopause, menopause age demographics. I think the common thought is trying keto or intermittent fasting or something along those lines in perimenopause would be the way to lose weight. Carbs being bad. Carbs are bad for you in
Mhm.
perimenopause and menopause. But really, honestly, I feel like in general, like women have been kind of like told that, that's a bad fuel source for you. Obviously, hopefully most people know that that's false, but why? Like, why is that false?
False for a lot of reasons. So to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. And to lose the right types of weight, meaning if we want to lose fat mass and sustain muscle mass, you have to have high protein and be in a calorie deficit. Doesn't matter. They have looked a lot into research. And if you're listening and you're interested, we can send you the research articles on dietary approaches of low carb versus low fat diets, fasting versus moderate calorie deficit diets. And all of it shows as long as you're in a deficit, you will lose weight. Doesn't matter where it's
Mhm.
coming from. Now, what's important, especially for women, is if you are eating enough and you're getting put in a healthy caloric deficit, you don't want to pull from protein. So, yes, you do have to pull from carbohydrates and fats. I pull from both and also increase the right types of exercise to make that happen for women. Women tend to villainize carbs because we think it causes fat gain, and that's just not true. Carbs are a critical source for our brain, our cognitive health, our brain functions off of glucose, unless you're in ketosis. And ketosis truly is very, very hard to sustain. It's less than about 20 grams of carbohydrates a day, which is fantastic for individuals with seizure disorders and some other medical conditions, but for most people is not sustainable and is not necessary,
It
in my
gives you bad breath.
professional opinion.
And it gives you bad breath.
And it gives you bad breath. And there's a lot of research on keto. There's a lot of differing opinions on keto. When you look at performance specifically, carbohydrates are a wonderful thing, and that is the lane that I'm in, is looking at it from a what the most amount of research says. Might change my opinion in 5 plus 10 years, but as of right now, that's what most of the research says. So carbohydrates are not the enemy, but they're really easy to villainize, and it's important to look at what types of carbohydrates you're consuming, when you're consuming them, and what are the other things going on. So in order to lose weight, you want to make sure, and this is where I start all clients, that you're just starting at the healthiest functioning point. Most of my clients, we start with stabilizing. Are you strength training? Are you moving your body throughout the day? Are you doing some sprint, interval, or hit, depending on what stage of life you're in? Some sort of polarizing cardio. Are you eating enough calories? And if not, let's get you there. Are you eating enough protein to repair muscle and build muscle? If not, let's get you there. And once all of that is said and done, when you're eating enough, then we're going to pull some carbohydrates and some fat. Yeah, that's going to help you lose weight. But for individuals, especially in the perimenopause group, who just think I can't eat carbohydrates, a lot of times they're metabolically dysfunctional. There's some sort of hormone imbalances. And yes, if they eat a lot of carbohydrates, they might show weight gain. But that's not because carbohydrates are causing weight gain. It's because of all those other factors. It's just really easy to villainize carbohydrates. But when everything, again, is functioning correctly, you should and can be eating an abundance of carbohydrates. Most of your diet, the AMDR is 45 to 65% of your calories should come from carbohydrates. I don't know a lot of people that that's the case.
Right.
And that is well studied. And so when you look at the why behind carbohydrates and keto or diets like this, or people like, well, I cut out carbs and then I lost weight. A lot of times you just cut out calories. It wasn't necessarily the carbs. And another big like fun fact with this is carbohydrates, a gram of carbs, stores with 3 grams of water when it stores in your muscles and your liver as glycogen. So when you cut out carbs, if I were to cut out carbs over the next 2 to 5 days, the scale would drop really fast because I'm losing water weight. I'm desaturating my muscles and therefore dehydrating them from those carb stores. So a lot of people cut out carbs like, I lost 10 pounds. I mean, you can store a lot of carbs in your livers and your muscles. It's a lot of weight. So we lost so much weight, but you didn't necessarily lose fat mass. You just saw the scale go down. And you also, vice versa, you eat a big pasta dinner or some breadsticks or whatever, you see the scale go up. It's not fat mass. It's just some water because those carbs are being stored. And you can test that on yourself. And it will show you that if you soak a piece of bread in water, that's like a common thing I've seen too. It like stores all that water too because it's very, it's called hygroscopic, which means it holds onto water. Um, so a lot of times too, we cut out carbs or add carbs and we see the scale move, but you really need to look at your body composition. Are you losing or gaining fat mass? Not necessarily. You have to be in a deficit for a long time for that to happen. And vice versa, you have to be eating a lot of calories over a long period of time to be gaining weight as well. So with carbohydrates, making sure one, they come from really solid sources, especially in perimenopause. Pushing fiber is a big one. The gut microbiome changes as a result of hormone changes, and fiber is a prebiotic. It fuels the live bacteria. So with perimenopause specifically in carbohydrates, I'm pushing high fiber carbohydrates. Fruits and vegetables, especially like your berry categories, anything with a vegetable that has a skin on it as well, or seeds in it, like an avocado, which is technically a fruit, but or potato skins, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, things that have those kind of skins or shells on top of them or tend to be higher in fiber. Whole grains, your oatmeals, your whole wheat breads, certain legumes, so your beans, your chickpea noodles, and then other healthy fat sources like seeds and nuts are going to be really beneficial for that fiber intake. So making sure your carbohydrates come from whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. I can't tell you any person that I know that had too many fruits, vegetables, and some potatoes and beans and gained fat mass. You'd have to be, if that's the case, you're just eating too many calories. It's not because the carbohydrates are causing fat mass gain.
Makes sense. Is there anything metabolically speaking that shifts enough in a woman, let's say not using hormone therapy, to support, perimenopause transition, and then obviously like menopause being once you haven't had your period for 1 year? Is there anything from a metabolic standpoint that women should shift? Obviously, like you said, fiber being huge. I mean, how many grams of fiber a day would you recommend for women within that stage?
Typically in that stage, I'm pushing more like 30 to 40 grams per day. The RDA for adult women is 25. Most of the clients that I have in perimenopause onward, or even before that, I'm pushing 30 to 40 grams per day. I think the average is like, it's well over 80% of US adults don't hit. I think it's way more than that. I think it's in the 90s. I don't know the statistic off the top of my head. Most individuals don't consume enough fiber. That's a really good
Yeah.
place to start for so many reasons. If you get your gut healthy, a lot of things go well. Perimenopause, that's a big one that we see that shift happen. Beyond fiber being an important topic, protein needs also increase. Protein we push for all women mostly are under consuming protein, but especially women in perimenopause who are strength training, have to fuel your muscle frequently and with enough dosage. So typically recommendations also increase. Muscle breaks down at a faster rate, about 3 to 8% muscle loss over the course of a decade on average for women in that demographic, that kind of after 40, starting perimenopause into postmenopausal. So muscle breakdown is happening at a higher rate. So you need more protein. Also, you have less collagen absorption and building. So collagen is is the highest protein type in our body. It builds our hair, skin, and nails, our joints, our ligaments, tendons, etc. And we have less production and less utilization too as we age. So for women, making sure that collagen is a source, and that's super easy to add into orange juice in the morning before your workout, into a smoothie. I put mine into a yogurt parfait. So that's one that we decrease production with age in women and men. And so that is definitely something, it's an incomplete protein, but it counts towards your total protein needs. An easy one to add in as well. And then a lot of times with that demographic, peri to postmenopause, working on anti-inflammatory nutrients. As estrogen, progesterone decline, specifically progesterone, our HRV also tends to decline. We're less susceptible to stress resilience, and so we don't recover as well. Our body doesn't handle environmental stress as well. And so making sure that your food is anti-inflammatory. So every color in the rainbow, lots of antioxidants in fruits and vegetables, things like tart cherry juice sometimes as a supplementation, but making sure that they're getting most of their carbohydrates and nutrients from whole foods and fruits and vegetables to help promote less inflammation, because we're already dealing with managing inflammation worse than we once were once we get into that stage of life. So if our foods can actually help our body in that versus foods that are causing more inflammation and worsening some of the symptoms that you're having in that stage.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
good.
last one. True or false? You should not eat. I feel like sometimes when I ask these questions, I'm like, people like everybody knows the answer to this question, but a lot of people
They
really
don't.
don't. So, true or false? It is more effective for fat loss to not eat post-workout.
Post-workout?
Post-workout.
Oh gosh, that's a thought. Absolutely false. Who was thinking this? So,
Like you come into the gym, you burn all
right.
this energy, you work really hard. I burned all those calories. A
Yeah,
lot
I
of them
don't get,
aren't very
I get it.
hungry afterwards, right? They don't really feel hungry afterwards. So then I'm not gonna eat.
If that's your thought, that's so logical. I don't blame you for thinking that at all. That's a very logical thought. Same thing with fasted workouts. It's logical. Why would I eat when I should burn off my fat? Here's why. I'll tell you the science reasons. So, before and after your workout, absolutely you want to eat, but especially that after workout, we have this beautiful thing called the anabolic window where our body is receptive to all the nutrients that we eat. As women, trying to get it within 45 minutes, but ideally within 2 hours, but really optimally within 45 minutes. Making sure that you're eating after your workout is critical, and it is not going to hinder your fat loss whatsoever. And here's why. Those calories are going to your muscles to repair with protein and to replenish lost energy stores with carbohydrates specifically. I love to say to people, and I think this really clicks for a lot of individuals I've talked to, is I don't want you to think about adding more food necessarily. Some people need to, but thinking more so about allocating calories correctly. So if you don't eat after your workout, but then you're overeating after dinner because you're ravenous and you haven't eaten all day. What good is that doing before you're going to bed? Not much. If you can allocate those calories you're already having to right after your workout, well, now those calories are going for repairing your muscles, replenishing lost energy stores, and going to your muscular health. Then the rest of the day, if you then have slightly less carbohydrates or slightly less calories, well, then that's supporting fat loss. And so logically, then thinking about instead of just, oh, I need to add more, which a lot of people do, but just start with reallocating carbs, reallocating protein to after your workout. And the food that you're eating is going to support the recovery. The stronger your muscles recover and the more faster your muscles recover, the more muscle you build, the more fat you burn at rest. So now we're tying all of these concepts together of the better you recover, the better you're going to feel, function, inflammation, recovery, all of that's going to improve when you are when you're fueling right after your workout. And another thing with this that you have to realize is we have this thing called EPOC that happens, which stands for um, excess of like post oxygen, so exercise post oxygen consumption, to keep it simple. So basically, we have an elevated oxygen consumption after we exercise, and that causes our metabolism to stay elevated. And so when we eat, we're also burning through those calories faster and we're replenishing those lost energy stores. It's helping our body's metabolism get back to normal and also to recover better. And so our metabolism's heightened at that time, so we're also using those calories more efficiently than if we've been sitting all day and then we're going to eat a huge volume between dinner and a PM snack. I see a lot of people who it's like they're having 800, 1,000 calories between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m., but they're having 400 calories before noon and they're exercising in the morning. So we just got to allocate that differently.
Yeah. Okay, last question. I swear. Um, the I have spoken about this before, and I think you've heard me say this. I know you've heard me say this. When we talked about low energy availability, like earning the right to move my body, earning the right to exercise through fuel. Like I have earned the right to exercise because I have fueled my body enough today that I know that I'm capable of, bringing intentionality and at the appropriate level of intensity of what my body is capable of that day, right? So I'm earning my workouts through um, calories or through consumption of fuel. There are times though where let's say I have, I know in my day I have about an hour, left. I have an hour in my day that I can go and work out, but I know I don't have any access to fuel. I know that I'm going to have to come straight out of it, straight into a meeting. I don't have anything near me. I don't have the ability to refuel myself. So there have been times where I've actually taken it that extreme as well, where I've said, okay, like I know I actually can't eat afterwards. So I probably am not going to work out right now. Is that a thinking that makes sense, or would it just be better to just get the workout in when you have the time to get the workout in and eat, 4 or 5 hours later when the time came?
I think it depends a little bit uniquely on your schedule. And if you have the ability, you and I have the, ability to adapt sometimes according to, okay, I can't get my workout in right now. I don't have fuel, so I can do it after lunch. And there's a lot of individuals who don't have that luxury in their life and they've one window to work out. So I do think it depends slightly on your capability, your demands throughout the day, your lifestyle, and finding that middle ground of if you haven't fueled and maybe the solution is likely what I tell people is you gotta have to just adapt. So if you can adapt to a working out at a different time when you're fueled before and you're able to fuel after, then adapt there. But if you look at your work week and I'm leaving for a conference tomorrow, this is the only time I have to work out, I forgot fuel, should I do it or should I not? The answer is do it, but maybe slightly adapt. Right now at Victorous, we're in a grit cycle. It's really highly metabolically demanding, pretty high intensity, pretty high cardio expenditure, pretty high volume of weight as well. And so in that situation, it might be, yeah, I'm going to go, but I'm going to go do a lift only, or I'm going to do every other round. I'm going to move for quality, so I'm not putting more stress on my body that I'm unable to support afterwards. So I would say looking at your day as a whole of like, how do I best need to serve my body today? Sometimes the answer is don't do the workout. Didn't sleep well, don't have fuel in your body, don't do the workout, go for a walk, go stretch, go meditate, help your body get into a happier state. It's not, you say this all the time of like more is not more, and that's exactly it with nutrition as well. But looking into realistically, which I love to take the realistic side of, sometimes you don't have that luxury to make a huge swing in your day. So figuring out, okay, this is the stimulus I have in front of me, this is the food I have capable to be consumed. How do I need to adapt to some of that? Or maybe I forgot my post workout, but I brought my lunch with me. Have a couple things from your lunch that you packed with you if you're headed to work, and then figure that out over your lunch break to go and grab something quicker. Maybe, you can have a sandwich right after your workout if that's what you have around to you. Like I said earlier today, good, better, and best. So, what is the better option here? Maybe it's not that full demand workout, maybe it's changing the day, but I think adapting to say, what does my body need from all angles? And sometimes that's rest, sometimes it's adapting the workout, sometimes it's changing it. Same thing goes with nutrition, is figuring out what do I have, how can I make this better? And how can I support it? And that's the thing that people get caught up on is all or nothing. Well, I have to go to the gym, so I have to burn all these calories, or I have to do the full workout, or it doesn't count. Says who? Who says it doesn't count if you do body weight squats versus a barbell back squat? Move your body, be a little restorative. You're not going to put your body in a worse state of high cortisol, stress, sympathetic if you haven't fueled and you're working out in the morning. Just move in an intentional way, eat in an intentional way, and you're going to see a lot of progress without having to take huge major strides.
I think that's interesting. That's, you want to maximize your time, especially for those of us that are busy. You want to maximize your time and energy. Like, is this workout worth it if I don't have the fuel afterwards? Which I don't know a whole lot of people that think that way, but that's the way I think it.
You're right.
I'm like, is it actually working for me to break down my body right now when I know I don't have time to actually fuel myself afterwards? So just being, I think that give and take of like I have gotten finally to the mindset of like of my workouts being like, am I fueled before and am I fueled afterwards? Can I fuel both directions in a way that my performance is where I want it to be? And if it's not, yes, adapting, but also like being okay with like, yo, like I need to maybe take things a little bit different or a different direction in regards to like fueling, I better to eat than to uh kill myself in the gym and not eat. So
And that's where a lot
yeah.
of, just one kind of final thought here is, that's where a lot of challenges can happen for women. And I've seen it too of women who are over exercising, under fueling. We see it locally. I see it a lot of times with clientele as well of, you would be shocked a lot of times the benefit and the how your body responds when you become more intentional in how you treat it. And that goes well beyond this topic, but it, especially when you look at, and this has happened for me personally, I can say this beyond professionally, I can say personally that I have adapted to not always going hard or not always doing what I think I should do, but truly listening to my body, even knowing all the answers, but really taking time to be intentional of, how is my body feeling? How am I moving it in a way that is rewarding how it's feeling? And that's sometimes restorative movement, and that's sometimes moving it hard and pushing myself, but being able to be adaptable in your movements and your nutrition, but really just being intentional in that adaptability of, how am I adapting to best support my body? A lot of times that's all it takes to, for a lot of body changes and composition changes. It's sometimes that simple as well.
Yeah. Yeah, to your point, I mean, literally, and I think that it's easy for people to think that like people like us, like it's just an easy, we just know we do the right things all the time in the best ways consistently. I reached out to Mary Jane on Monday. I was feeling tired, I was feeling fatigued, I felt run down. I knew like I was going to be traveling, so I wasn't going to be able to lift for 2 days. So I'm like, I have to get to the gym and get my lift in. Otherwise, I'm not going to be lifting for 3 days. Like I'm going to feel better if I do it, blah, blah, blah. But I knew I was run down, like literally just walking around. I was yawning. And I texted Mary Jane and I was like, I shouldn't work out, right? Like I know that I shouldn't, but I shouldn't, right? Like I need someone else to tell me like this probably isn't the best idea for me to go and do. And she took a while to respond and I didn't go and I was laying in bed and she texted me back. She's like, I hope to God you didn't go because you know the answer to that question. But just giving permission for anybody to like, be true with yourself and your body and your capabilities. And I was able to go into the gym this morning and PR the lifts that I was supposed to do on Monday today instead. So why not? Like that time that my body took to heal and repair in the meantime was obviously needed. So
Mhm. That's our hope too
it
with
made me,
Victorous and obviously expanding that, but tying that into the mission at Victorous I've been able to be a part of and the culture and environment that you're creating, Stacy, is incredible in that support specifically is supporting each not only life stage but also that individualism and empowering coaches at each location to say you don't have to do this workout today. Here's some other options for you. Here's how you can pivot. And I hope everybody listening to this has a Victorous, and if not, has an online Victorous or has a studio that or self workouts and is able to take these recommendations and lessons to be able to adapt because we sometimes have to, as coaches and as professionals, push for that until you see it. But this is both of us screaming
yeah,
at you and recommending that you listen to yourself and you take the time to get to know your body in ways well beyond this podcast, but taking that time to really connect with your body and figure out what it needs to function its best. I promise you it's worth it. And I'm very grateful for places like Victorous who advocate for their members and women to figure that out and
yeah.
support it in the movement space.
Yeah, yeah. How can people work with you, Nicole? Like, what's the best ways for people to get a hold of you? I know, like, whether that's on the local level, whether they have a Victress in their own area, and then also, I know from more of a clinical perspective, with the Always in Motion Nutrition, I think that that's a huge component to also keep in mind because with the blood work and all of that type of ways that you can support too.
Yeah, absolutely. So on my website and social media, it's on all platforms. It's Always in Motion RD, and that's my website as well as my social media handle. So feel free to reach out on any of those streams, as well as my email's Nicole at alwaysinmotionrd.com. We'll make sure to add that in there. And then at Victor's locations too, beyond my work and private practice one-on-one with clientele, I have the incredible opportunity to work with each Victor's location in providing Victor's nutrition coaching. So myself, other nutrition coaches, and other registered dietitians are planted at other locations as well as are available virtually. So whether you're a local member or just follow the Victorous movement, you are also able to work with Victor's nutrition coaches if you're looking for in-person or virtual support on that regard as well. So a few differences, and feel free to reach out and nuances on that if you're looking for more of that medical support versus just overarching nutrition guidance and coaching with day-to-day intake and exercise. Then we got support, we got options for you. So feel free to reach out via email or social media or via website, and make sure you get set up with myself. Have some opportunities coming in October to take on some more clients. So that is very exciting. So I'll have some spots open then, as well. I have some other amazing coaches and resources to pair up with clients.
And then for Lincoln members, reminder, there is a workshop this Saturday. If you are a member of Victor's Lincoln, that Nicole and Piper will be putting on. I guess this is going to launch after that. So if you missed it, sorry. That sucks for you.
Reach out. We'll send you information. Piper, who is our coach, Rom Sheck, who's our coach at Victor's Lincoln, and I are doing that on Saturday the 31st. So
Yeah,
let me know if
Saturday
you're
the
interested in
31st. So
that.
by the time this
I'll send
launches,
you the PowerPoint.
it'll be over. Glad we timed that. All right. Well, that's good. All right.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, as always. And I know I will be seeing you again within this space and in others. So thank you, thank you. I learn something new every time I talk to you on here. So it's a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. Appreciate it. And thanks for listening in.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.